I have another set of rings that are called Object A, Object B, and Object C. And this is more of a, from my post-production mix templates that I have these. Again, these are 7-1 rings, but they're not, let me see actually if I can do this right now to show people kind of where they're going. And I'll maybe mute the audio so we're not necessarily listening to a sine wave right now. So this could be Object A. And there's not enough DSP. Why?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's fine. We can.
That's fine.
Yeah, we'll take a look when the audio is playing.
Yeah. So anyways, so I have those objects. I have an auto pan that kind of does, if you want to pan stuff in the 5-1 bed or the overheads, just mono things that are going in a circle. I don't necessarily need to draw automation. You can do this with the Atmos panner, but this is just a simple thing for mono things that just, you know, swirl around. I have this plugin called Slapper. Anybody who's mixing multi-channel, immersive, anything should have this delay plugin. It's awesome. Multi-channel, multi-tap. Basically, you assign, you know, time and level, and you can put high pass and low pass filters very easily and position them wherever you want in your, you know, 712 bed. So that's my go-to like surround delay plugin. The spread is also from the Capital guys. This basically has some filters at the beginning from front to back that are just, you know, filtering more and more as they go, and just really quick delays. So it's not really, you don't hear them as delays, but they're not happening at the same time with the original source, and they're just like a little bit more delay as it goes back. So it kind of like creates that spread, as it's called.
And the filters that you're applying there, are they fairly standard between your tracks? So you can always get your flavor of Dolby Atmos.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is set in my template. I hardly ever touch these, never really. This is just to set like, oh, it gets a bit darker as it goes to the back. So because if it's the same signal, since we're duplicating it, it's just going to feel like the same signal coming out of everything. But this kind of gives that sense of like, it's almost like a reverb, kind of like tailing off.
Dropping off. Yeah.
Towards the back. Then I have a multi-channel reverb for medium hall, large hall, a chamber, and a studio. The cinematic rooms did a wonderful job. People look into this multi-channel reverb as well. It's, you know, sounds really nice, and it's not too like CPU heavy, so which is great. And a 480. This is also from next template, I think. This is kind of like the 480 is obviously a stereo reverb, but this is again mapped to the front, side, and rear of the 7-1 bed on the ground level, and then the overhead front and rear that I have. So it's basically a surround reverb, but it's a more clunky way of doing it. But it sounds great. The 480 is a great reverb. Just having this in my template takes half of my UAD processing, but
and it's going to move, you know, the 480 into its what fourth decade of music production.
Yeah.
So good to be keeping that in line.
Exactly. I mean, the master fader group is pretty straightforward. I have basically on all of my outputs, I have a limiter so they don't like clip or like, this is again a post-production thing, but I'm limiting everything to -2.3. So like no object is like clipping into the renderer or like doing distortion. So this is just my way of protecting everything that I do. And
so
there's
while we're on limiting, so obviously we have a delivery specification for Dolby Atmos music, which is -18 loudness measured across the renderer. So those limiters kind of help you to get into that specification while still maintaining the kind of pump and drive that you might be used to in pop music.
Absolutely. I mean, I watch, like, I mix at 85, obviously, to recommend the loudness, and that kind of gives me already, like, when you're mixing at 85, you're not obviously limiting it to -10 because you would blow your brains out and bleed probably. So like that level actually makes it easy to like mix at the specification. But I definitely, like, one thing that I'm doing with these Atmos, like, kind of remixes that I'm doing for different artists, the stereo mixes that we're so used to, like, has so much, like, either stereo bus compression, mastering, everything that kind of like contributes to the mix, that when you take them out, it's like, oh, that was actually like helping the mix a lot.
Right.
So like I kind of like have those as references, and I'll kind of like, most of what I do is I'll address the drums, guitars, vocals individually, like to create the sound that they had in the master, just by processing them instead of like relying on limiters. But again, on this template, like definitely when I opened up the session, I have limiters on like my groups that I created as well.
Right.
So this definitely kind of helps, push that and give that oomph that we're kind of like used to in pop music.
Fantastic.
Let me see if I skip anything else that I want to mention about all of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can kind of like.
Yeah. So she mentioned a couple of tools there. Anything else that you're particularly excited about in terms of plugins you've developed, you've utilized recently?
I'll start with just before we get into panning, which Atmos, like immersive mixing, is all about. There's like a couple of cool things that I want to show, and if I should have marked which tracks had them, but I'll just put it on here. This PSP vintage warmer, people should know about this because this is it's a compressor, limiter, exciter, like everything all in one, and like you just touch the knee and put a little bit of drive. You don't even have to do much, and it kind of helps with that, like matching the master sound that I was talking about, because like drums especially, like you kind of need them to like come alive. This really helps with that. And also this is like a free plugin that came out recently from Slate, which I actually like a lot, because again it kind of helps give the vocals that extra bit of clarity in terms of presence that, again, maybe the mastering engineer was kind of like adding to the mix. It's an easy way to just touch this just a little bit here and there, and you're kind of like in the same ballpark with that. So those are like my two go-to like things that when I'm mixing Atmos, I'm like always reaching for those things. Beyond that, I mean, I'm just using anything and everything that is available, obviously. In terms of panning, let's talk about that, because there's like different ways to do panning in Atmos. There's like the way I kind of like do things in a way, and some people like use the Dolby Atmos music panner, for example, a lot for different things. I tend to do a lot of gestural mixes, which means using the built-in panner in Pro Tools, and I'll listen to a pass and I'll just like pan it wherever I want. I'll just in the room listening, do a gestural kind of like pass of it. The other one is this energy panner. This guy's Sound Particles did a fantastic job of creating this plugin, and basically what it does is, I'll play this section where it's this guy. I don't know if you can tell by what's happening, but as the signals are coming in, you have a threshold and ratio, and you can set where these like things are, so it creates that kind of a movement. But basically the sound as it's coming kind of like follows the path that you kind of like design it to follow. So it's a really nice intuitive plugin to just, instead of doing gestural mixes throughout, you can kind of put that on, come up with like a shape that you like, and it will kind of do that. You can do a similar thing with the Dolby Atmos music panner, which I have here as a step sequencer. this, you know, maps to your objects. You pick an object pair that you want to have. And by the way, guys, I don't know if we addressed this at the beginning of the session, but we did I'm basically giving a binaural feed, but I think Zoom is dumbing it down to mono. So if you're not hearing the movements, it's not that we're not trying to hide anything. It's just like it's not happening with Zoom, unfortunately, but you can see the movements as I play them in the plugin, so it'll kind of like make sense and you can kind of understand what it's doing. So
Mert, just to flag, we seem to have become disconnected from the renderer. So on the if you go to the renderer remote application, just reconnect that. I think the there we go. Perfect, and you should be set.
okay. Seeing that.
Yeah, the renderer opening on your system kind of threw us for a loop there, but that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I'll play this.
As Mert mentioned, the Zoom system unfortunately transcodes everything to mono. So just you know, accept that it's going to work, and then follow Mert's artists on Tidal, and you'll be able to hear his beautiful work.
So I'll mute myself. Sorry, I tried to open up the renderer remote also, but I don't know why it's not now showing me. Did I close that window, Ceri?
Maybe, yeah. There we go.
I'll play this so you guys can once again. This guy is a really nice, you know, step sequencer. I literally just made that movement just to make it really obvious, but you can basically either copy the two if you have a stereo object, which makes it kind of like sums it to mono and moves them together. You can choose to mirror the XY. I'll just mute this so you can kind of just see the motion, but not necessarily hear it. So like they'll move in, you know, just different combinations that you can do. And with the elevation, you can just choose to keep them flat. When obviously when it's muted, it's not going to the renderer. But you can basically create different elevations, which, you know, changes the height mode, and you can do any kind of different thing. And I basically did point movements when I was doing like editing this sequencer. I just put dots here, but you can like draw a line if you want to go in circles. Like with every step, you can. I mean, go wild, go nuts. We can really do everything with this. And I don't know how this would sound, but it's a cool thing.
Part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you have all of that that you can use. And one other trick that I kind of do with when I just want like a simple movements, like typically with B3s or Wurlitzes or pads, I'll actually have, is this it? Panman. I literally just have a Panman Sound Toys plugin, and this will go to like the two object beds that I was mentioning. I'll open this up. So like this is one of the object beds that I was mentioning. It has its placement is like this, and basically what it's doing is panning left and right between these things. So I'm not necessarily, you know, I like using that for pads and again for like kind of like washy sounds, because the objects are to your sides and to the top and they cover a big area, and then the whole sound just kind of like swirls around you, so it kind of gives a nice lush movement.
But puts the B3 into the space that it should be in.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. What else? Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the energy panner. Same thing. In terms of panners, I think that's it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, so when you, I mean, there's when you start to work in Dolby Atmos, you know, what was what did you find to be the most sort of useful thing not to do? Because I think there's a million things you can do, and it's great to experiment. What would be the thing that you kind of say to people like, this didn't work for me?
Right. I mean, I tend not to do like gimmicky movements, like the last movements on the Dolby Atmos banner. I tend not to do those as much. I mean, I try to, like, music is like, when I'm mixing, I'm assuming the stage is still like in front of me, so like drums and vocals are still in front, and then I try to expand the rest. Like, I'm not like I said, I try to stay true to how I would like to listen to music, which is just like enjoy it and not necessarily have a whole bunch of stuff like whizzing around you. And like one thing I actually realized when I was like doing these mixes that are, big pop productions have a lot of elements, is when you have 20 different things doing 20 different movements, you actually kind of don't hear them.
Yeah.
Just because the human mind can only focus on so many things at once, it just becomes like, we used to have this like wall of sounds mix. It becomes a sphere of sound that you don't really like understand what's happening, but it's like big, which, if you like it, go do it. But for me, I like it more when I can actually like have moments where I can pick out and it's like, oh, that was so cool, that was so interesting, and it keeps the listener more engaged to be like, I wonder what's going to happen next. But like, it's kind of more of an interactive listening experience rather than a passive, while I'm cooking and the music is playing there. Like, I want to hear what's like happening in the music,
Fantastic.
That's, what I would say.
Okay, fair enough. So the object bed that you've created, obviously that has a lot of flexibility in terms of where you can place some things. We have a question here about the bed. Now, I am personally a big advocate for the 712 bed staying, and I will fight anybody that argues with me. But the object bed kind of allows you to get through some of that, what might be seen as a limitation of the system. So you can actually put overhead objects into specific locations. Is that kind of how you utilize it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the 712 bed is great, and I use them for, like, again, if I'm mixing a track that already has a stereo mix, typically like the stereo effects, I'll kind of like put them in the bed and open them up to certain places. But the object bed, like you said, for the overheads, the 712 is just like left and right. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you can actually do movements with this, and the three other object rings that I have, object A is like on the ground floor, object B is similar to it but like a little back and a little higher up, and object C is like up high here. So like all of those placements I have, again, if I'm doing an orchestral thing, it can be strings on the bottom floor, horns, and then flutes or whatever like up here. It gives me that flexibility. If I have like actual 7/1 stems coming, I can easily like pan them.
Yeah.
Or in a pop production, again, if I want the pads to be like back here, but I want like the horns to be just there, you can create like individual objects and use those. And I do that also. But like I said, for certain things, like when I use the object beds that I have, I can pan them to like 3 objects at a time, and it creates a bigger, placement. And I think of it as almost like parallel compression. You kind of like you're mixing different objects, different placements together, and it's not like pushing the signal louder to like have it there, but it's like coming from a bigger area, so like you don't have to push it that hard with the volume. But
and have you found that helped to adapt your mix into different locations as well? Obviously, we talked in passing about Tidal and the headphone options that are available there. We'll dive a little more into that. But obviously, yesterday's announcement of Lucid Air in the car, that's fantastic. And obviously in the home environment as well, I think is something that, that flexibility with the object bed and the versus the traditional bed has enabled people to get closer translation. Is that something that you felt as well?
Yeah, I think so. I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. And also like when you talk about a headphone, like translation with the object beds, we can open up the binaural render page. You can see like the object bed is set to, sorry, the regular bed is just like mid, and the bed basically kind of like once I change everything, it changes all of it. That's just how it works. And with the
Yeah.
object beds, I can set, okay, I want the left and right and the whites to be near metadata, the sides and the surrounds like mid, and like the overheads just like far, because I want them to feel that way, whatever. And the different obeds that I have, I again map them to specific, like why the object A has like near, mid, and far, similar, but just different placements of them. And then, I have my actual objects set to near, mid, and far as well, which I use dedicated in the mix. But that also helps again with the translation. If I'm putting something in the back on the headphones, again, I was testing this yesterday on my headphones and it sounded, but in mono, people can hear it. But you can actually hear on the headphones, like if an object is in front or in the back, and like, I think the headphone translation is tough front to back. But this, like, actually, when you like listen to it, you can hear it. And that kind of like using object beds give you that flexibility of translation, and also just foolproofing your mix to different environments, basically.
So for those of you unfamiliar with binaural, for immersive music, it's obviously useful to kind of give a quick overview of it. So binaural essentially is, allowing you to experience sound in a three-dimensional way from two channels. So there's two channels being, fundamentally speakers attached to your head. And so there's a couple of models that go on there. There's the HRTF, so the head-related transfer function, and that's basically, if you think about, the way that you hear a sound, it gets to your right ear before your left ear if it's on the right-hand side of your body, subsequently behind you. And there's a bunch of other things that are factors in that. And you can actually experiment with this right, where you're sitting. So if you, just click your fingers, impulse top, middle, bottom, you'll hear that actually there's a difference in how the sound is perceived, even from the same source. And so what the renderer is actually allowing you to do is position those sounds as they would be experienced in the real world. And you might want to think about the timbral effects of that. So high frequency sounds coming more from the ceiling versus the low frequency sounds. And those render modes allow you to bring something closer to you or push it further away. So in the Atmos mix with speakers, you'd be hearing the effect of your actual mix, but then in the binaural, you could place three sounds in the same physical location and same physical speaker, but have that depth of field in the binaural. So it's a really deep feature set that is useful to explore.
Yeah, exactly. Because the one difference, like when you're in a room, like for example, if I have the drums in front of me, the vocal kind of up front, and then the guitars come in on the sides, like you feel that 90-degree, like, oh my God, stuff is like happening right next to me. But when you're on headphones, I mean, kind of everything is happening from the sides. To give that depth of like front to back and everything, having these metadata options really just helps to like clarify that kind of experience on a headphone mix, essentially.
Fantastic, cool. Okay, so once you've created your mix in Dolby Atmos, how do you go about actually distributing it? Obviously when you started, we were printing mixes into the renderer, and that is no longer the need. Can you show us how to bounce a mix directly from Pro Tools? If you,
it's actually quite easy, guys. You can come to your bounce mix thing, and basically you have the Dolby Atmos ADMB file right here. You can set up everything. And oh, by the way, we didn't talk about my IO page, which is also important. We can, but this is all of the things that I've mentioned. I'll do a quick side note since we opened this. This is your friend when you're mixing in Atmos. You have to make sure like you have your outputs, buses, and object beds are properly lined up, and you can just kind of like use these things properly. But again, you can basically at a first frame of action, if you want to set, you know, when the thing is starting, your frame rate, obviously, and, you know, getting the metadata from the renderer, it kind of allows, actually, let's open this IO setup again. Getting the IO data from the renderer means I have these objects, right? The OBED front, this is my naming in Pro Tools.
Right.
Object 1, 11, 12, this is just like the outputs that I have here. And then OBED left and right, and all of these namings, they're actually coming from the renderer because I have them named as such
Right.
here. So, you know, basically it's all integrated. It's all right there for the taking. And you can just, you know, bounce everything right from here.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, that seems to be much more easy than it used to be, and you know, less LTC generating and things like that. So hopefully, it enables people to get creating Dolby Atmos much easier than it used to be, and much smoother. So that ADM file, you know, are we that's what gets delivered via a platform such as Avid Play that you use to distribute this track from Jessica.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what it's meant for your artists?
I mean, it came through you guys, which was amazing.
Well, of course, but I guess more. How did you get involved?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, Avid Play was, you know, I think right now they're still the only one. I don't know if there's another one that supports Atmos distribution for independent artists, that you can basically just create a profile. You know, anybody who has, you know, Avid set up on their thing, you can go to my portfolio, whatever, and you can basically Avid Play dashboard. You come here and you have everything once it loads, right there and there. And literally it's as easy as just doing anything. I mean, you have to have your stereo mix and the Atmos mix, so you can upload them, like submit them both together, because Tidal, I think, still like defaults to stereo if your device isn't capable of playing Atmos, so you need to have the stereo mix uploaded at the same time. But literally you put the artist picture information, you can do splits, the artist gets paid through that. You can do everything that you would want with a distribution platform there. And, you know, literally you just upload the ADM file and it's good to go. Wonderful.
Cool. So once you've finished with your mix and you're ready to distribute, how do you deal with getting artist approvals and things like that? Do they come back with revisions?
I typically do like listening sessions at the studio. Like when I'm doing album mixes, I'll do the whole album myself, and then I'll invite them to the studio to listen to it together. And if they have any revisions, it's mostly like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we panned this way, or if this did this here, like, you know, and we'll just kind of do them and kind of finalize the mix that way. I haven't had any like other revisions other than like more creative, oh, can we just try this for me? You know, I would like to try it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, because it's new for artists, like they're not like almost all of the artists that I'm mixing right now, this is their first Atmos mix that they're hearing. So like, it's amazing to start with. And they're like, it takes them a second to get used to it. And then like, okay, let me listen critically and like be an artist and decide like what I want. And, you know, they do that and we'll kind of finish off, like get the approval that way.
Yeah. Have you made use of bounce to MP4 in the renderer and sent it to somebody's home, or is that not something you've done?
I haven't done that yet. I mean, just because we're still like, I'm literally the only one in the studio right now, and I like having like, if somebody can come and listen and we can have traction like together, I like to do that. That's
perfect.
But you know, I think, you know, once like this kind of like becomes a little like too much to handle and we're busy, it'll be like, here, like check it out and let me know what you think. By the way, I've definitely done like, I've sent binaural renders to people so they can check on headphones and give me feedback before coming to the studio. But yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just exported from the renderer, correct? So the re-renders that you popped up a little bit earlier.
So I don't have anything open right now. Let me just open up a session. So once you have a master file loaded,
Yep.
you can basically export your re-renders. And again, this can be 7.1, 5.1, stereo, binaural, ambisonics, whatever you want to do.
Fantastic.
You know, you can do anything that you want, and it's really easy to do.
Great. Okay, so we're going to switch over to Q&A here for a few minutes before our 11 o'clock finish. Mark Erickson, thank you for your questions as we've gone through. So Mert, you mentioned that actually you know, this particular track is an old template and uses the multiple beds. And that you've since moved away from that process. What was your decision to moving away from multiple beds, you know, versus and to routing to the same bed versus keeping them separated out?
Right. I mean, the template itself is actually still something that I use. The only thing that changes those like drum bass synth beds. That's the only thing.
Okay.
And it's because it just takes a lot more like processing power to like bus all of those. Like if you have 7 food groups that you're trying to do busing of 7.1, you know, auxes and route them to places. I don't know if the person who asked the question was there when I was trying to show the different rings that I had, and it said Pro Tools doesn't have enough processing. Like, I'll run into those situations, then like I'll have to like make sacrifices otherwise. Like all of the limiters I have, you can get a more powerful system and that can be a solution. But if you're running on your laptop or whatever, like it's just going to be a more CPU intensive process to have all of those beds. And my reasoning was, again, right now it's kind of like I don't want to say the Wild West in terms of music, but literally all they're asking is the ADMB wave file. So if that's all I'm delivering, that's kind of what I'm working on. Again, if it gets to that point where I talked about like for sync, we want all of these stemmed out and whatever, like I don't want to like reprint the same thing like 7 different times when I'm finishing a project. Like if I have those beds, when I'm mixing a film, I literally have those bounce buses that I bounce the project once and I have 7 stems right there and there. So like that was the thought process of creating them. But I just kind of like got lazy, to be honest. And then so this is like, I'm happy to mixing this way. And right now it's okay. If I need to adjust my template in 6 months, I'll adjust it and I'll have to work with it that way. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about what you've kind of been preparing for in the input configuration in the renderer is, you know, that you can actually take those re-renders and separate those out. So you could create a custom re-render and grab just your synths, just your drums, you know, whatever in that sense. So in terms of processing, you know, I think yes, there are some advantages to keeping them separated. The disadvantages today are that the binaural settings are the same across all beds. So if you wanted, for example, treat your drum bed differently than your synth bed when it comes to binaural, that wouldn't be possible. So you might want to use more objects and, you know, more of those object bed configurations. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both.
Yeah, and when I was like doing the bed, like that's a great point. I didn't think about that because most of the bed for me was just like maybe having an LFE channel because LFE is always in the bed. And like for drums and bass, if I'm gonna have stems, they need to be in separate beds, whatever. But like the LFE, you don't need much binaural. But like I would keep those beds. I created 7.1. You can have them smaller and just, you know, use more objects instead of a bigger bed, have a smaller bed and use more objects, and kind of just have the bed for the sake of stems, basically.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Yeah, so in terms of, and stereo clearly isn't going away. Have you experimented at all with kind of taking your Atmos mix and rendering out stereo from it, whether that's stem stereo and further rebalancing, or direct 2.0?
I kind of like experiment with just like hearing how it sounds like in the render. You can set your room to be 5.1, you know, stereo, whatever. So I can just kind of like hear how it sounds. Whether this be, I mean, I was kind of mostly doing these for, I have obviously a good setup here, but like if you get an Atmos soundbar that's only like 3.1, which is essentially an LCR with a sub, you know, how would it sound like in those kind of situations? I was kind of like trying to see how it would sound, but I haven't necessarily created stems or balanced or anything. I mean, this stereo mix, like for them, already exists. I definitely check the binaural mix and make sure it like translates to that. And one thing that I didn't mention that people should keep in mind is that I started doing more like left to right movements when I want something to be noticeable in Atmos rather than front to back, because again, that front to back with visors and things like when you're in a room sounds super cool, but it's less obvious on headphones. So like if I can do more of an S shape or like a Z with anything, I'll kind of do that. So like it becomes obvious and it's more entertaining for the headphone listener as well.
That's a great tip. Yeah, I like that.
But yeah, beyond that, I haven't done much like stereo like check.
Fair enough. Well, we'll get there. Okay, so last question before we talk about, you know, the wonderful information that's on screen there, which allows you to get started. If you don't send anything to the LFE while mixing, will bass management feed signal through the LFE on playback? So I'm going to answer yes, it would do that for you. But Mert, let's talk about, you know, the LFE and how you've used it in your mixes versus allowing the bass management to do that.
Yeah, I mean, bass management for me is what it is. Bass management, like I have bass management in my room. My overheads and sides, these are, you know, 705 small 5-inch speakers. They're not huge. So like, and in Atmos, everything is full range. Mm-hmm. So like anything that these guys can produce is coming out of my beautiful, you know, 18-inch sub sitting there. So like I have that availability. But LFE, can I share my screen just again, or should we stay on this?
Wait, I think we can share again. Just
yeah. Real quick. Like when I'm doing my LFE, here are my two like LFE channels, and I'm not necessarily sending a duplicate signal just to the LFE for the sake of increasing the level of the bass or the kick.
Right.
I actually have, you know, subharmonic processing on them, and I adjust these like it says adjust subharmonic settings to taste. Basically, you find a setting that you like, and for me, it's more like if I want to hear the extra lower octave, I want to hear the impact of the kick, or not on this song, but on another song I mixed. Like for example, the pre was kind of it had a bass, but it wasn't like super impressive, and with the LFE just like felt like a more stadium approach of like, holy shit, I'm feeling this, like it's a good like thing. So like you have an LFE channel, I would say use it, and use it with like something that makes sense for that extra effect, instead of just like putting another kick, basically just doubling it, you know, just do something interesting with it. And yeah, we can go back to the information.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I've actually been told we have a few more minutes, but I imagine that there are folks who are going to jump off here. So one of the other questions that came up was about can you use Avid Play if you have not used Pro Tools? And that's actually one of the things that I was really excited about, to be honest with you, because the Avid Play system is a community, the Avid Link system is a community plugin. So it runs on your Mac independently of Pro Tools, or PC independently of Pro Tools. And Avid Play is a tie-in to that. Incidentally, you're able to get a discount for Avid Play for Atmos right now. Ben from the Dolby team here is going to put a discount code into the chat for you all. But the only requirement there is that you have an ADM file. So for Logic, it's going to be slightly different in that you need to actually still print into the renderer. So you'll put the renderer into record and print down in real time into the Dolby Atmos renderer. That the DAMP file that's created, the Dolby Atmos master file, can then be exported to an ADM. And that ADM is then what you'd upload to Avid Play from your Logic session. So it's completely independent of Pro Tools and available for everybody for, I believe the subscription is $50 a year, but as we mentioned, 20% discount to South by Southwest attendees. So go do that. And we also have the 90-day free trial of the Dolby Atmos production suite. So the QR code might work for some folks, which is great. But if you go to dolby.com/music/create, you'll be able to find a bunch of resources, including that 90-day production suite trial. So you can get started today on your systems. I will say that production suite is Mac only, but in terms of working with other workstations, while we offer support for Logic and Ableton and Pro Tools, the core audio device that gets created, the Dolby Audio Bridge, is compatible with most workstations. So recently got FL Studio up and running with Dolby Atmos. I've had users working in Reaper and Bitwig Studio. So really any content creation platform for music, as long as it's capable of 48K sample rate output, GarageBand, sorry, you're out, is able to be used to create Dolby Atmos today. We focused on Pro Tools today because that's Mert's platform of choice, but support is wide through the industry. So yeah, we hope to meet you where you are. Cool. All right. So thank you, Mert, for giving us your time today. Thank you for, again, to the South by Southwest Professional Development track for allowing us to do this session and for supporting Dolby and Dolby Atmos in all of our endeavors. If you haven't seen the Lucid Air announcement from yesterday, it's worth checking out. That's a great place to have LFE in your mixes, to be honest with you. When you're driving in the car and you want to crank that sub, it feels really good. And translates really nicely. So you know, very, very excited about that, and for everything that's coming with Dolby Atmos music. Mert, thank you for being on this journey with us. Thanks and thank you for all your tips today.
Yeah,
all right,
people to create. Yeah.
Thanks. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, and maybe do it in person next year.
Yeah, hopefully.
Wonderful. Have a great day, all.